So if you have a pool at your house, would you consider renting it out to basically a bunch of strangers for say $40, $50 an hour and let them pee in your pool? I'm making a joke. But this is actually a real company. It's called Swimply. We first heard about this thing on Shark Tank, and that's why I'm bringing this up, because when I first heard this, I was like, what? And what about Airbnbs? How would you feel if your neighbors essentially are all Airbnbs and they're partying all the time? This is essentially something that's going on in Kansas City, and I'm sure it's multiple cities going on. And also, too, the issue is as well, they do have some regulations in place, but only like 10% of the people have licenses for these Airbnbs. Here's a quote from a resident regarding this stuff. And this person's saying, I have had to start seeing a sleep therapist. Quote, I've had to get a sound machine. I have to leave on the fan, a TV to drown out the noise. So basically, there's just too many people partying all the time. And so like it's really ruining the neighborhood. Here's another person that is commenting on this as well. No one wants to live in a community of strangers, and I think it's reasonable. I think I struggle personally in the neighborhood setting with having people from outside treat us in a way they would not treat their own neighbors. So that's the basic gist of it. Is there's a bunch of strangers coming out, they're loud, and they might be disrespectful because they're not really your neighbor. They're just like a short-term visitor. And I know that on YouTube there's a whole bunch of like people saying, hey, you know, do an Airbnb and you can make tons of money and you're gonna all be great and stuff like that. And this is part of the stuff that I have mentioned in this channel that I think should be regulated. That's my opinion on these things. Also, too, you have big companies like Blackstone coming in and buying a whole bunch of properties and essentially controlling the real estate market and pushing a lot of people out of home ownership and turning the USA into a country of renters, which I think is a problem. It is a complicated issue, and this is sort of why I'm doing a follow-up on this. Certainly love to get your guys' thoughts on these things. The other thing is, too, as well, is if you take a look at mortgage costs, essentially things cost too much. And it's interesting because this data is from April, and I think the data has changed as of now. But just to give you a general sense, mortgage payment is roughly 31% of the American household income. And you can take a look at this chart here. It has been spiking. Basically, your mortgage payments is a larger percentage of your income than is comfortable, which I'm sure you know, it costs too much. Also, too, if you take a look at this is a home price to median household income. Basically, how much do houses cost compared to what people make in their household? And you can see it's been spiking. Now, yes, houses prices are going to be coming down, but we're still at elevated levels. You're looking at like a 7x multiple, that kind of thing. And one of the things that probably asking is like, okay, why doesn't the government do something? In fact, they had this meeting. This was in June 23rd, 2022. And this is the title. This was in the House of Representatives, and the title of their meeting was, "Where Have All the Houses Gone? Private Equity, Single-Family Rentals, and America's Neighborhoods." These companies like Blackstone, which essentially borrow a bunch of money to buy a bunch of property, right? And also, too, they can have people that are investing in them, say, from all over the world, who are also borrowing a bunch of money to invest in said company. So there's a lot of leverage going on. And when interest rates are low, I worry about this because it certainly drives prices up and forces regular people out of the market. And one of the things that has been happening lately, as you can see here, they have slowed down their buying. And so one of the sort of reasons why that our essentially our home prices are going up like crazy is because of these companies like Blackstone. Now, it's not Blackstone alone. There's a whole bunch of other factors going on. People were moving around the country because of the work from home kind of thing. But Blackstone and these kind of essentially investor home purchases were representing a large portion of real estate sales. You can see, though, it has declined. I'm looking at this chart here. It's sitting at around, you can read here, 17.5% of essentially purchased homes are by investors, right? So these aren't necessarily people that are going to live in these things. They're using it as an investment vehicle, which is pretty large. And if you take a look, too, you guys can see from 2000 up to now, which is 2022, the amount of homes that are purchased by investors, right? Not necessarily people who are going to live in these things, keeps going up and up and up, and it's just pushing regular people out of the market. Also, too, there's a racial component involved with this story, which is makes it even more complicated to talk about. In fact, this is data coming out from the government, and this is essentially home ownership in the USA broken down by race. You can see here the blue line is essentially white people have larger home ownerships than other groups in the USA. Yellow means other, so I'm in that group, but it mixes a whole bunch of different groups, and then you have black and Hispanic are the orange and the gray lines. You guys can take a look at this chart for yourself. But there are essentially big disparities in these kind of things. And, I do think it is a problem. One other thing that is going on, and you can make any number of explanations for it, but I'm just telling you the numbers, is that there's a lot of foreclosures in, say, black neighborhoods, and then companies like a Blackstone will come in and buy up this stuff and then essentially turn them into rentals. These are just numbers and facts. And you can see here, I guess it was like 40 major metro areas where they're buying these stuff. And so it's like Atlanta, Charlotte, Miami, Jacksonville, Phoenix, Orlando, Detroit, Vegas, Tampa, Nashville, all of these kind of places. And it's you can see that here, this is your zip codes as well that are oftentimes when these investor companies come in, they're buying in black neighborhoods. And it makes it hard for people to build wealth when you're turning these things essentially into a whole bunch of rentals that will never become home ownerships. In my personal opinion, it's a problem because I feel for anyone out there who is struggling, and the way to really build wealth in your family and through generations is, to be fairly frank, through home ownership and real estate. And so it's a kind of a strange structure that we have. And there's, like I said, multiple factors going on here, because you also talk about employment issues, education issues, right? All of these things intersect. And also, too, with big money coming in, which can sort of bid up the prices of these things. There are a couple different kind of conversations about this in the Congress, right? You're going to get stuff like this one here, for example. This is the Neighborhood Homes Investment Act. This would be a bipartisan one. We're going to talk about another one, which is like a Wall Street Landlord Act is what they're calling it. That would be more just Democratic one. But it's not like the government doesn't talk about this kind of stuff. The issue, though, is when you're talking about home ownership, real estate, we're talking about really a lot of money involved. And essentially, you got issues of zoning. You got issues of who's backing said loans, right? So if a company like a Blackstone wants to come in and buy a bunch of this stuff, is the government going to back these kind of loans? And so then they get really involved in politics and this kind of thing. Another issue that you have as well is sort of like the whole fairness thing, right? So this is another article. I'm just showing you guys different articles as we go through this. It's a complicated issue, and I'm trying my best to illustrate it for you. This is the Stop the Wall Street Act one, and what they're saying is, we'll read it here. The stated goal of the new House bill is to deter future institutional investments into single-family homes, right? So we're talking about single-family homes. It would try to do this in a few ways, include by barring corporate investors from claiming certain tax breaks like the mortgage interest deduction, and imposing a transfer tax on the sale value of new family home purchases, right? So I just wanted to read that to you guys so you can see, because we're talking about like taxes and stuff like that, because the way you regulate these things, because people say, oh, Chris, it's a free market. People can buy whatever they want. Yes, that's true. If you have money, you can buy whatever you want. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you would encourage that by having tax policies in place. The same way that, for example, do you agree or disagree that do we want to encourage people, just a regular family, to be a first-time home buyer? Should we give them tax credits and these sort of things? And this would be, moreover, if you believe that, say, corporations should be allowed to buy a whole bunch of single-family homes in bulk, should we give them tax breaks, or should we give them tax penalties? These kind of things. This is such huge money. It matters quite a bit. You can see here more we're talking about here. The legislation would also bar the government's, and this is just proposed legislation, the legislation would also bar the government-sponsored mortgage companies like Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and Ginnie Mae from assisting certain large investors in financing, and would establish new tax credit to help affordable housing developers build and rehab low income. So essentially, like, what we're talking about is who is the government backing, which companies. Are we doing these to be rentals? Or are we doing these to build, and refurbish homes for people to buy? Now, the interesting about this, and this is more conspiracy stuff, so I'm not going to put out any conspiracy theories other than it's just facts. The person who is sponsoring this Wall Street bill, true story, is this Democratic Representative Ro Khanna, and it's kind of funny because he was also in the headlines just yesterday too regarding the whole Twitter drama. So whether or not these things are connected, who knows? I'm not going to push any conspiracy there. So I'm literally just giving you facts. It's just kind of funny that these things come out at the same time. That he's involved in a bill regarding big money and real estate. He's in his bill, essentially the one that I was just showing you, is essentially to limit the type of purchases that corporations can buy into single family residences, right? And so I think you guys get it, but it's just kind of funny that it comes out. So it could be a thing, and I don't know if anyone else has noticed this. I was like, what the heck? Regardless of conspiracy theories or not, it looks like, at least according to this article, that the bill has a low chance of passing anyway. I just wanted to bring it up to you because I do think, and like I said, I've several times on the channel, I have no qualms about saying it. When we talk about politics and stuff like this is the kind of issues that I would run on myself. These kind of things I think are great to talk about in politics, of like, how can we solve housing issues for Americans, and how can we encourage Americans to increase the access of homeownership for everyone, and I firmly believe that. And so this is sort of why the corporate money in buying up homes makes me feel uncomfortable. And you guys can agree or disagree with that kind of stuff. I'm totally fine with that, but this is the kind of stuff I prefer to talk about in politics. I feel like sometimes our politics is just a bunch of smut. It's the best way to put it. Now, another issue, and this is where sort of why I present this stuff to you guys. I want to get you guys' input as well. Some people make the argument that when these big companies come in and buy, say apartment buildings or a bunch of residences, that they're not maintained very well. And like I said, everyone's mileage is going to be different. So this is sort of I like to get your opinion. Like, would you agree or disagree when the big corporation comes in? Do they keep up with the maintenance? And so let me give you some description and example of kind of what we're talking about here. So this is referring to a Greystar. If you guys are familiar with Greystar, please let me know. So this says, as Greystar took charge, I'm about the getting a new building here. His alarm grew, rents soared, trash collected in the hallways and on the rooftop deck. The security guard showed up less often. One tenant said she was frightened when she encountered a large, seemingly drunk man, as she didn't know dancing a leotard and tutu in the parking garage. Crazy people in the parking garage, this kind of stuff. Another renter described having to heat her bath water on the stove after she woke several times to find only cold water flowing from her tap. And here's a quote. I understand that rent goes up, cost of living goes up, everything goes up. But with that, we would expect the quality of the building and the quality of management would stay the same. And that was not what we saw. And then it's saying here, Greystar did not respond to questions about tenant complaints except to say that the resident satisfaction was very important to the company. And you can read the headline here. It says, at Invitation Homes, unpermitted work leaves leaky plumbing, faulty repairs, renters say. And so again, it's more sort of people complaining about the stuff that happens when you get these big corporate landlords, is what they call it here. And we'll read some more details. I just want to read this stuff to you, and I'd love to hear you guys' input if you agree or disagree with these kind of stories that we hear. Yet some of the company homes have missed basic quality checks. Renovations at the company's rapidly assembled collection of 80,000 homes often were made without building permits. According to a review of Invitation Homes property sales in several states, a California lawsuit, and a Washington Post analysis of building data in 3 cities. Skipping building permits may have allowed the company to avoid costly delays and save millions in fees, according to the estimate based on the company of homes. But foregoing the permits, which are required by city codes to ensure quality and safety, has led to shoddy repairs and maintenance that put tenants at risk, renters say. And this is a quote from someone, we're paying $4,000 a month to live in hell. So I don't mean to laugh at this person's situation. It's just when you read the description, it's like, oh my God. And I understand this stuff is anecdotal. I understand that. But I want you to understand also too that there's a lot of money involved with this stuff, guys. You can see here. So for example, this has to do with the Freddie Mac, like their loans, and a lot of these loans are backed. They're involved with essentially this private equity stuff. You guys can see the chart here for yourself. It's like Lone Star, KKR, Starwood Capital, Brookfield, a bunch of it. It's like I said, it's not just Blackstone. This is a phenomenon in the USA, and I think probably multiple countries, not just USA, but big corporations buying up a ton of real estate and essentially turning countries into nations of renters. And the issue is that the more that these companies have money, the more politicians that they can buy off. It's just the way that the game is played. My wife and I, as you guys know, we live in Korea, and in fact, it's a big problem here in Korea as well, where like just regular people have a hard time, buying anything unless it's from a big corporation, because like big corporations own everything. You don't really get any deals of where like regular person buys and sells a home to regular person. It's just not as common as it was. And this is sort of why I believe in sort of regulation, this kind of stuff. It's the same situation. Like, for example, do you want to live in a world where, say, Walmart buys out all of the mom and pop stores and you no longer have any small businesses? I think that's sort of what we're getting at here. And I prefer to keep small businesses around. I think that's the backbone of any country. I also think home ownership is the backbone of any country. I get emotional about these things because I've seen it for myself for years of small businesses. I have friends who have many small businesses, stuff like that, and it's a tough world, and it's hard to explain to you guys when I try to explain this stuff to you guys. When I see, like, say this is in this example here, you have Kenneth Griffin and Schwartzman. They're just giving like $111 million to political parties. In this example, it's the GOP, but to be fair, they give money to both parties. I want to make that really clear, right? They give money to both parties, and it just feels like a lot of times our politics and our politicians are bought off by people to set policies in place. Like, say, this is another example. They want to raise the limits for the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to back higher mortgages of, like, it's like $1 million, but the actual number is like 723. But the whole point is that they're writing policies to benefit them, and it just it's frustrating. It's frustrating, especially when you follow this stuff and you've been in these circles. Like, for example, this guy Schwartzman. It's really funny. We're gonna go some more details of it, but like he was all about getting Trump elected. Trump was also a real estate person, and it's fine if you guys like Trump. But it's fine. You can like whoever you like in politics. But I'm just talking about understand that big money kind of decides who wins or loses, or at least tries to play a hand of it. And like I said, and this is on Open Secrets, you can find it for yourself. The Blackstone, they're like ranked 6th out of 27,633 contributors on that website. Basically, they're like a major political contributor. And you guys can look at those stuff for yourself. There's a ton of details and stuff like this, but I just want to show you that it is, yes, both parties, but they do give a lot of money to affect elections. This is a real estate guy who's been involved with this stuff quite a bit, and essentially he's a very, very powerful person in the USA. You could certainly argue that this person is one of the kingmakers, right? So he's buddies with Trump, gives a bunch of money, and also, too, is sort of an advisor to Trump. Criticized Obama, but ultimately, and keeping it fair, ultimately it looks like he made friends with Obama after he gave a bunch of money. That's literally right here. It says, eventually a deal was brokered with Schwartzman help. The new tax plan added $1 trillion of additional revenue by raising taxes. So he's like, working with all sides to get his stuff passed and what he likes. And moreover, which is crazy about this stuff, I at one point also am connected to this person because he gave money to Tsinghua University, which is where I used to teach. And so it just shows like the big money controls all of us in a way, and it is what it is. And I don't want to push conspiracy theories like too much, but this is just facts. It's crazy when you read about these kind of people. He went to Yale. He was part of the Skull and Bones Club, which is kind of funny because essentially I'm not going to say it's like some crazy secret club that they do all things that control the world. But I will say what the Skull and Bones thing represents, if you don't know, it came up during an election. It was when Kerry ran against Bush. They were both essentially in the same college club at Yale. Is not necessarily what they're doing in the club and what secret handshakes they're doing. That stuff's not that important to me. What's important to me is just that it represents that the people who control the politics, the government, and business and all the big money are all in the same circles, right? It's all part of the same group, and it sort of represents the older, larger problem, in my opinion, right? Of essentially big money keeping little money, making it more difficult to own houses, start businesses, and these kind of things. So I don't think that's a crazy thing to say. And if you guys disagree with anything I say, I'm happy to hear the things like this, but. In my opinion, I've seen it myself with my own eyes, where it's tough for the little money to succeed. And it's sort of why I don't want to make it tougher. I want to try to encourage, more policies to get more Americans to have more home ownership. I don't think that's a crazy thing to say. And if you guys disagree with anything I say, I'm happy to hear the things like this. But in my opinion, I've seen it myself with my own eyes, where it's tough for the little money to succeed. And it's sort of why I don't want to make it tougher. I want to try to encourage, more policies to get more Americans to have more home ownership. I don't think that's a crazy thing to say. Also, too, though, which is a complicated part of this is also very real, is that, banks have to decide, okay, who do we give money to buy houses and who do we don't give money to buy houses. There's certainly a lot of discussion in this, and this is where it gets controversial to where, unfortunately, right? So some ethnic groups, so for example, Black and Latinos have a harder time getting mortgages. Now, the issue is also, to be fair, you could say, well, their credit scores aren't as good and they can't qualify, right? I'm just saying to be fair. And so we got to figure out, okay, so like, how much of it is the institutions don't want to give them money, or how much is that they just aren't reliable rent payers, like a good way to say it. However, this is also to be fair. I can understand that if someone is an honest worker, a hard worker, and they want to get a home loan and they're denied because of the way they look, I have a real problem with that. And I hope you guys understand my point of view in these things. I try to keep these stuff as fair as possible. And this goes for anyone out there. Let's say, you're a coal miner in West Virginia, for example, and you're denied a home, even though, you feel like you work hard and doing everything, you play by the rules and stuff like that. And you try to, buy something and everything's like too expensive and all you can do is rent from the rich people. I hope you guys understand what I'm saying. I don't want to ever paint this of like, I only prefer one group over another. It's simply not true. I want everyone in America to have an opportunity to own a home. I hope you guys understand what I'm trying to say and sort of why we go over these things. There was an interesting part about this that I was reading as well. I'll read this to you guys. Like I said, this is a complicated story. And it's emotional for me because I want people to be successful in life. I really do. That's why I went into teaching. So we see this is the invisible victims of the housing market. You can read this here. In the aftermath of the Great Recession, it was a depression for those who would live through it. I lived through this as well. But in the aftermath of the Great Recession, the victims of the housing free-for-all were clear. An estimated 3.8 million homeowners lost their homes to foreclosure from 2007 to 2010. It's a lot of people lose their homes. So, and I remember this stuff. It was really, really scary. And I'm sure for those of you who are older, you remember this stuff as well. And plenty more also lost theirs in the following years. But the overly strict lending standards and tighter regulations that followed create a new class of victims, people who are unable to join the ranks of homeowners. And this is a professor over at Brooklyn Law School. He's saying, he called these would-be home buyers, quote, invisible victims, people who probably could have stayed current on their payments if they had been approved for a loan but didn't get that opportunity. And so this is sort of why I mention this stuff, is that we have a system to where the big money can write the rules that benefits them. They can even default in their loans, say like in 0809 even crash and get bailed out by the government. And a lot of people who lived through this stuff were really, really pissed, myself included. So, it's because sometimes, how can I say, people who haven't lived through this stuff, you kind of don't get what we're talking about here, and so why it's unfair and why why we complain about these things, because we feel like the game is rigged. And I think this is a very, very, very important issue. I think this cuts to the core of American culture, and the question I'll pose to you is, do you think we want to encourage or discourage regular families, just single families, right, to have a home or not, and to own a home or not? And that's a question I pose to you. You could certainly make the case that if you want to live in an entirely, free market, if you want to call it that, if money is there and money wants to buy up said property and buy it all up and turn it into Airbnbs, that there doesn't need to be any regulations or anything like that, and that's okay, right? I'm just saying that's sort of what we're talking about here. I have a different opinion on these things, and I don't know how many Americans out there that think owning a home is stupid. I don't know. I'm assuming it's still a thing that people want to do. Although, however, we've looked at numbers in other videos on this channel. The percentage of young people, it's like the Gen Z, and I think the numbers were like in the 20s. It was really low. That are in homes is lower than it has been in history. And I remember looking back at it, just talking about the other data. It was something like, in the past, it would be, say, 34% of young people were getting into homes, but now it's like in the 20s. And I think it's going to keep going lower. And also, too, as we go into recession, things are going to get tougher. People are going to lose jobs and this kind of stuff. And so, unfortunately, I think you have a situation to where, when we talk about the Blackstone situation, or that fellow YouTuber scammer, I don't like him, Meet Kevin, these kind of like corporations like, hey everyone, let's pool a bunch of money, let's buy these homes and turn them into rentals, and it's like essentially you're encouraging people to reinforce the system that we have in place that keeps people out of home ownership, and I find that deeply, deeply disturbing. And I hope you guys understand all of my thoughts on these things. And like I said, if I were to ever run for office, this would be one of the main issues I would talk about is like, how can we create a world where everyone can at least have an opportunity to own a home, a stable job, these kind of things. And I wish we would talk about more about this kind of issue. Unfortunately, it's not, I don't know, it's just not on the radar. I think either Americans don't talk about it enough, or the way the media is structured, it gets your mind thinking about other things, wondering like who goes to which bathroom, or what people do in their bedroom. And I mean, for real, I feel like, why is there headlines about that stuff? That's why whenever I talk about those issues, I'm just like, oh, I'm just so frustrated talking about that stuff. I'd rather talk about like, home ownership, which I think is a more pressing issue in my opinion, or creating jobs and that kind of stuff. So anyway, you guys know I like talking about politics, and I like talking about it in a way that I wish more people would. So anyway, I do appreciate everyone's time. Thanks you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.